I'm talking today about my learning so far and going to share some stories from a neurodiversity affirmative practice. So who am I? Well, I'm multi-storied. I'm a systemic therapist. Now, I have to say that I work in private practice. I work in an extremely affluent area of Dublin. So I work with people with means to get supports and resources. And I'm highly privileged because I don't work within a system. So I pretty much get to work the way that I want, which sounds kind of unusual within from some of the, I don't work in the NHS, I don't work in the HSE, so I feel very privileged to be able to work the way that I want to work. My personal life, I'm also a mum and a neurodivergent family, so that's my son Lenny. That's the reason why I'm here. So he was diagnosed when I was sort of partway through my master's in systemic therapy in Dublin. So I have always, my relationship with autism has always been intertwined with a systemic lens, and that's really held me in good stead. It's allowed me to have a perspective on the systems within which we find ourselves in the services and be able to be critical about them and challenge them when I need to and advocate for my son. So I have been very blessed in that regard. But for me, because of this dual role, the dual roles that I have, it's really important for me to maintain curious reflexivity, because I know that my own personal story has the potential to open up conversations within my work. It also has the potential to constrain them. So I have two supervisors from different disciplines, and I go to group supervision. And so I get help in terms of my reflexivity, and I really am very careful to attend to that. And I think as therapists, we should all, be really careful, be really curious, reflexive in terms of autism and what we think about it, and are our ideas up to date? Are we open to evolving them? Are we open to learning? Because we need to reflect on that before we enter into the room with people. So how do I work? Let's see if I can get this down well. Okay, so how do I create a neurodivergent affirmative practice? Well, I see my job as to help people come home to themselves, to connect with, to language, and make sense of experiences and relationships. I take a narrative embodied approach. So I tune into my central nervous system and how that becomes activated within sessions. I'm intensely curious. My curiosity never ends. I'm always want to know why. I see therapy as cross-cultural. I would probably be identified as a neurotypical person, but I work pretty much exclusively with autistic people, neurodivergent people. And I see people as complex, neurobiological, sensory, social beings. And I need to, attend to each of them and how they interact with one another. And I pay extremely careful attention to sensory. So my ideas around autism are, I take the Maori sort of wording of it in his or her own time and space. So for me, it's really important that I adapt to the needs of the people that I work with. So I would look at the pacing within sessions, giving time for people to reflect on stuff, to take time to sit in silence with people. I'd also adapt the duration of sessions. A lot of people, an hour is way too long. So, and the duration would evolve on a week-to-week basis. Some sessions might be 45 minutes, the next week I might say, well, we try half an hour, and that's okay. And it depends on the week. I might say, look, I'll book you in for the hour. If you could only do half an hour, that's okay. So for me, it's really important that I show that normative rules and standards do not apply within my room. So, eye contact is vastly overrated, and I have, had the privilege of being educated on that within my room. And I find that now I give myself the freedom not to make eye contact with people, and it's incredibly freeing. And it's shown me that, you can connect with a person's voice and have a real deep connection to that and really hear people in a much deeper way. As we say, you don't listen with your eyes, you listen with your ears. For me, it's really important that I constantly try to evolve my knowledge around autism, but that I hold it really lightly and that I'm open to deconstructing absolutely everything. So it's also important that I take a non-expert position. My position is very decentered. The people that I work with are at the center. They take the central position. I always say in the first session that I am not the expert on your lives. You are the experts on your lives. The expertise that I hold is within the therapeutic process. What does that mean? That means I listen really, really, really carefully, and I follow my curiosity and my intuition, and I ask questions. But you are the expert. And that is massively important with the people that I work with, because I am a service provider. I hate the word service, but a service user as well. And so I know what it is to be the parent of an autistic child and to be constantly subjected to expert knowledge, which changes all the time and can be incredibly overwhelming. And I find that a lot of people become disconnected from their own wisdom. So my job is to try to connect people in with their wisdom and to help them become, step back into being active participants in their life and to advocate for themselves and to be autonomous. It's really important too that I make time to make the abstract concrete. I'm a very visual person, so I need to respect that. And I scaffold the conversations with externalizing practices, because a lot of the people that I work with, social communication is different. And so I don't want people to be uncomfortable and to have to pretend that they understand the questions that I'm asking. So I find that externalizing practices are really nice. And I spend a lot of my time at work on the floor with a whiteboard. Whiteboard is my friend. And I found that actually, I think one of the most important things that I do is work from the floor, because I often work alongside people. I'll be doing like creative practices on the whiteboard or on paper or whatever it is, or else I'll be on the floor with my whiteboard and people will be sitting up in seats. So they're sort of looking down on me. And I think that's really it's really helpful, especially for teenagers who aren't used to being in a position of autonomy and not used to having an expert sitting there on the floor at their feet. And it's also really nice in terms of eye contact. It takes the pressure off. Oftentimes the person might be sitting up in the chair, I'll be on the floor. I might be visually mapping out their words or, interactional patterns within relationships. And I'll be looking out the window and they'll be, maybe, I don't know what they're looking at, and, writing things down, mapping things out. And it just takes the pressure off. It's lovely. So I'm in collaborative partnership with the people that I work with, but I'm also aware that I'm a meaning making with power. So again, it's really important that I hold my ideas lightly and I introduce theories, approaches, ideas as ideas to play around with. So choice and autonomy is central to my practice as well. I will often say, obviously, what would you like to talk about? Would you like to talk about this? Or I have ideas around what we could do today. What do you think? Or have curiosity around this part of your life or this. I find that really helpful. And also times when, a girl came into me and she was highly anxious in the first session. And I just said, you know what, it's okay. You can go and come back next week. Or she seemed to want to stay. So I said, well, why don't I'll just get the old whiteboard out and, why don't we map out your anxiety? Or you can, and you can leave any time. And that just, her anxiety, I could just see her visibly start to relax, and just having that choice to leave or to stay was really important. I'm extremely attentive to language. I try to follow the language that people use. The people that I work with, they spend a lot of time very carefully trying to articulate their inner experience. It's really important that I listen well and use that language. And they can often be make-uppy words, which I love. But also verbal language is often not the first language of the people that I work with. So I need to work hard to find preferred ways of communicating and to work with them. I also think it's really important to get it wrong. I get it wrong all the time. I fail my clients. I make mistakes. I ask stupid questions. I misinterpret. But the important part of this is that I will say it. I'll say, God, I'm really sorry I got that wrong. I was working with a girl, and the next week her parents came in. They said she didn't want to come back. And I said, I'm not surprised. I used quite a sharp tone of voice with her, and I think it was my tone of voice. And I said, you know, I think, what about if I write her a letter? And I wrote her a letter sort of saying, I think my tone of voice is quite sharp. I'm sorry about that. And if you want to come back in next week, I can learn more about that experience for you, or maybe I've got this wrong and it wasn't my tone of voice. And she came in the following week, and we had a good conversation, and actually I think trust really deepened after that, and the work became really meaningful. It broke something open. So curiosity, I want to just say something about curiosity. It's our greatest secret weapon. It's our greatest skill as systemic therapists, especially when it comes to autism. I find that, you know, it's not autism full stop. And I think when it comes to autism, a lot of practitioners, a lot of people, their curiosity gets turned off. Biases, assumptions come to the fore, and that's lazy as far as I'm concerned. We've got to be curious. We can't just say, you know, I've heard people say, oh, he lacks empathy because he's autistic, or all of these ridiculous assumptions. It's never autism full stop. It's always autism ... Everyone is multi-storied. So I want to say something about the beginning of therapy. It's really important to be aware that we're all stepping into the unknown, and that's scary stuff, and that it's really important that I try to create safety even before people enter the room. So I want to try to reduce anxiety as much as possible and invite in safety. And what I do is I will send somebody an email. I will include a picture of my room, which you can see there. I'll include a picture of myself. I'll give concrete information about what exactly to do when they arrive. You know, press the buzzer marked room 5. The buzzer is going to make a loud sound. The door is going to open. I'll be at the top of the stairs. I work in room 5. You know, if eye contact is not expected, you know, please bring something that brings comfort to you, whether that's a stim toy, whatever it is, wear comfortable clothing. And just say, you know, if you have any questions around for me before we meet, please do email me with them. And if there's anything in the room when you come in, please do let me know. And then when people come into the room, I'm really attentive to the sensory environment. Everybody's different, you know, and I don't make a big song and a dance about it. I just might say, you know, is it bright in here? I might turn on the lamp, or I might turn off the main light, or it's a bit noisy, or is it hot? Will I close the window or open it? Or, you know, what's that ticking clock like? Or, you know, just really sort of in a relaxed way, ask a few little questions. I don't have a prescriptive way of working. Each person is different and their needs are different. But it's really important that I am curious around their pathway into my room, because as we all know, autistic people may have, you know, they've often worked with with many or some mental health professionals. They work with physical health professionals, and they may have had not positive experiences along their pathway into my room. So I'm always conscious about that. And I'm conscious about how that informs their relationship to health. And so I know with one lady I worked with, Mary, I would say, you know, what's it like coming in here? Or have you been into therapy before? And she said, yes. And she said, you know, we only did a couple of 3 sessions. And I said, you know, why did you end the therapy? And she said, well, the person that I work with didn't give me enough time to say what I needed to say. And I need that when people interrupt me, my brain just jams and I lose my train of thought and I cannot get it back. And it's really frustrating. And that was extremely valuable information for me to know. So I was very careful around when Mary I thought she was, you know, finished what she was saying, I would leave a pause. And we got into a beautiful, slow, rhythmic way of working. And I wouldn't have known that unless I was curious around her pathway into the room. So there's been a lot of talk about diagnosis, and I really love the word identification instead. But I want to talk about holding the both and at diagnosis, because I don't think it's about either or. I think there's parallel potential I think, of course, there's a potential to colonize identity, but there's also the possibility of removing doubt. I have worked with people who have gone through 2 assessment procedures. Why? Because they have doubt about themselves and they want to make sure, they want to eradicate that doubt. It also is a way of inviting self-understanding, supports belonging and a connection to tribe. So for me, it's around creating a space to be curious around their experience of assessment. You know, who did they go to? And I know when I refer people on for assessment or introduce that idea, I am extremely careful about who I refer on to. There's only 2 in terms of children and teenagers in Ireland that I would refer on to, and 1 in terms of adults, because I know they are going to get an extremely positive experience. And I know that there's going to be post-identification, post-diagnostic support. So if I work with people who may not have a diagnosis, I may introduce the idea, and it's just an idea, and go, you know, look at what that might, you know, what are the possibilities of that, or what are the potential challenges around that, what will it mean for them at this time in their lives. I also work with people who have a diagnosis. And then for me, it's about taking space to deconstruct this assessment and to co-create alternative understandings. So I will introduce the idea that this is language that comes from psychiatric discourse. That is you know, the territory of diagnosis. It's psychiatry, but you know, they will use very pathologizing language. It'll be deficit based. You know, a lot of the assessments that I read, the assessment reports I read, there is no hint of strengths and skills. So what I want to do is create alternative understandings. And so I'll say to people, are you surprised by anything in that? Is there anything you don't understand? The language is very dense. You know, is there anything you disagree with? You know, so it's about creating a space for people to take a position on their on the assessment report. That's really important. So also, I like to develop ways for the person, the family, to become an active participant in the assessment process. So how I would do that is we will collaboratively create therapeutic documents. I'll say, you know, what about writing a letter that you could bring into your assessment? And I've done that with teenagers, and we write it together and to give a richer understanding of the person's life. And so that they feel like, look, that they're a part of this and they have a voice in it. I also hold diagnosis very lightly, and I make a distinction between the social construct of ASD and the lived experience. And I think once we make space to talk about diagnosis and the assessment report, we can say, okay, set it to one side and move on to the richness of people's lives. I'm really glad to hear other people talking about masking. It's always part of the work, and people that I work with, there's a lot of fear and confusion around masking. There's a fear, there's confusion as in a lot of people don't know when they're masking, and a fear, will they be masking for the rest of their lives? And I have seen the cost of masking and the burnout, and I would get a lot of teenage girls who arrive into my room in second year, and they've had a good primary school experience, some have not, some have been bullied, and then they've done their best in first year to fit in, and it's exhausting, and by second year they are completely burnt out. So it's important for me to respect the need for masking. It's protective pretending, and to explore a relational understanding of masking. When do you mask? Who do you mask with? Are there times in your life when you don't have to mask? And to create a safe space to begin to deconstruct the mask, but not to have expectations around that. Unmasking, being yourself can be scary. But my hope is that there be a parallel process of unmasking and reconnection with self. I really love Hannah Gadsby, and I love her sort of quote around masking, which is, I was a girl and girls were expected to be masters of the mingle. So I tried really hard to be a normal girl the best I could, and continue to do is to observe, guesstimate and imitate. As a coping mechanism for teenage me, it was an incredibly successful tactic. I was only bullied intermittently during my school years, but as a catalyst for growth, it worked more like castration. So how can I help people develop a connection to themselves, to me, to their families, to their communities? So it's important that I acknowledge and explore challenges and celebrate strengths and skills. I join with, I don't intervene. I join with to co-create preferred ways of languaging experience. I take time to uncover and develop relational understandings of challenges. Take time to explore passions and interests, to help people reconnect with values, skills, strengths, hopes across time and the present and future, with externalizing practices like River of Life, Tree of Life exercise and others. I find the phone is brilliant. It's a way to invite the outside in and to connect in with the richness of people's lives. You know, people will show me photographs of their hobbies, of their pets, of their family, of their friends. They'll play me music, they'll take their notes out, read their poetry. And also therapeutic letters is another really good way of connecting. So in terms of preferred ways of communicating, there's an amazing autistic person that I worked with, and they said to me, words are pointless like bread. Bread is just a vessel for sandwich fillings. And one of the visuals they sent me between sessions was this, and that to me described their internal experience more than words ever could. And even looking at it now makes me feel incredibly sad. So for this person that I worked with, that I just showed the image, verbal language was not their first language. They were incredibly articulate, but there were times in their life and during sessions where they couldn't access verbal language, and we would switch to WhatsApp, and they would send me videos to describe their inner experience. They would send me memes, they would send me photos. And as John so beautifully described how he works with alexithymia, said sometimes, you know, people don't have words for emotions, they don't have access to that. We have to develop other ways to connect with internal experience, including emotion. We have to help people find ways to express it and move through it. You know, the word emotion, the root of it is immovere, it means to move through. So the ideas I have around that are to ask questions around the somatic experience, work with imagery, videos, memes, music, written pieces, ask about fictional, non-fictional people that the person identifies with. So these are a few visuals. Now, the one on the right-hand corner to the bottom, that is one that was sent to me. Another person I worked with described anger as concrete, so we would work with that. And the person who sent the image down the left would have described themselves as the nerve man. And then another person I worked with externalized their anxiety as a ticking clock in their chest that got really fast sometimes. Oh, sorry. Oh,
you've got 5 minutes left, Sue.
Oh, dear me. Okay. I just pressed a button, of course, and I have, let me see, where's our word? Oh, here, I'm back. I pressed the wrong button. And how to process emotions. Well, immovere, to move through something. So movement, words aren't the only way to process emotions. So to move, to stim, to do exercise, to jump in the sea, to play squash, to dance, to play music, to write music, shapes, colors, poetry, journaling, drawing. These are ways to process emotions. Another guy I worked with, we spent a huge amount of time talking about his passion, which was flying. And he told me that aviate, navigate, communicate are his golden rules for living. It's the Tree of Life exercise I did, which you can look at if you want to later. So family work, I do a lot of family work. So I have learned to trust in the wisdom of the family members to know what works for them at this particular time. So the potential problems around family work are masking. You know, I don't want somebody in the room who's going to feel like they have to mask. You know, it's a lot to ask of people to come into the room, to listen, to process, to be expected to answer. Very difficult. So, and to, it's, you know, it's tricky because people have different ways of processing and communicating, different pace to how their brain works. But I've realized it's possible to do family work without having everyone in the room. So I interweave one-to-one sessions with joint sessions and act as a conversational bridge. So I would carefully agree, you know, maybe what agree with the person, what they want to share. You know, what's helpful for you to share today? A lot of the time it's nothing. But I find that a lot of teenage boys I work with, they don't mind. They'll share everything. They'll say, show mom and dad the whiteboard. I don't care. Other ways to connect conversations and share new understandings are therapeutic letters, whiteboard work, window of tolerance. I use that so much. It's so easy to understand. I use it with families. I use it with teenagers, just in terms of emotional regulation and in terms of, I don't know, how to, what causes fight or flight, what brings you to burnout, what brings you to shutdown, what keeps you in that window of tolerance, energy accountancy. And I see the possibilities and the value of family sessions. I was working with one family I remember, and Lisa and her family, her parents, and her dad said something around, sure, when you're 18 now, sure, you have to leave home, ha, ha, ha. And I could see Lisa had a bit of a response to this, a sort of micro response. And I said, Lisa, I noticed you had a little response to when dad said that. Is it okay to say a bit about that? And she said, Dad said, I'm joking. It's a joke. And she said, no, it's not. She said, I never knew that was a joke. And she's like 15 and she thought she only had 3 years left in the family home. And actually, we wouldn't have really got to that realization without having everyone in the room. And I can observe people's responses as other family members are talking.
2 minutes.
Great new meaning. Thank you. And that's an energy accountancy that a gorgeous teenage boy I worked with said, look, just share it with mum and dad. And that was hugely helpful. So the therapeutic letter, I just read the start, but this one I sent to somebody. Over time, I've learned something of the values you hold. You have talked about the importance of respect, equality, independence, routine, helping others, and connection to family and friends. I have been struck by the richness of your skills and strengths. Words are limited, I know, but when I think of you, the words that come to mind are academically and emotionally smart, articulate, perceptive, intuitive, empathic, thoughtful, and creative. I'm also struck by your ability to process information, attention to detail, and ability to think in patterns. Just 2 quick slides. So there are limitations to this work. It's important to recognize them. It's one approach amongst many. It's not always the right one. And it's important for me to introduce other ideas around sports. That is my son, Lenny, going therapeutic horse riding, which he adores and is incredibly helpful. So there's OT, art therapy, forest therapy, cycling therapy, equine therapy, ... Finally, reflections. So curiosity. I always want to know why. I'm never satisfied. So we need to be endlessly curious. It is never autism, full stop. It is autism, ... We're all multi-storied. We need to acknowledge, validate challenges, and celebrate skills and strengths. It's a parallel process of potential. I learn more from the people I work with than they will ever learn from me. Therapy is, see it as conversations of the possible. It's important to get it wrong and to own it. And my learning continues to evolve. And I learn from every single person in the room. I've learned from every single person at this conference. And I thank you for that.